In small towns, people say everyone knows everyone. But what they really mean is, they know what they want to believe about you. The morning sun hung low over Willow Creek, painting the rooftops gold and the sidewalks with sleepy shadows. It was one of those towns where the air smelled faintly of pine, gossip, and old habits. The kind of place where news traveled faster than the school bus, and judgment arrived before introductions did. At the center of it all stood Willow Creek General Hospital, a modest brick building on Main Street that doubled as both a sanctuary and a rumor mill. That's where Ava Coleman was starting her first day, a nurse with a calm smile and eyes that carried more wisdom than words. Ava was in her mid-30s, tall, graceful, and confident in that quiet way that didn't demand attention but earned it. She'd left her position in Baltimore to move closer to her aging mother, who'd recently settled in Willow Creek. She wanted peace. She wanted purpose. But peace is not what Willow Creek offered newcomers, especially ones who didn't look like they belonged. That morning, as Ava walked up the cracked sidewalk toward the hospital, her white scrubs crisp and her hospital ID hanging neatly from her collar, a patrol car rolled to a slow stop beside her. Inside sat Officer Ray Turner, late 40s, the kind of man the town respected, partly because they feared his temper, partly because he'd been there forever. He had the look of a man who believed he'd seen everything, the kind of confidence that made him careless. He leaned out his window. "Ma'am," he called, voice clipped. "Can I see some ID?" Ava blinked, taken aback. "I just showed you," she began, glancing at her visible hospital badge. "Humor me," Ray interrupted, stepping out of the car. His boots hit the pavement hard. "We've had reports of someone posing as hospital staff to get access to the building. Just making sure you're not her." She frowned softly. "I'm new here. My name's Ava Coleman. Today's my first shift." She held out her badge, her fingers steady even as her stomach turned. Ray took it, squinting at it like it might reveal a trick. "Baltimore General, huh? You from there?" "Yes, I transferred here." He looked her up and down. The pause lingered too long. "Funny, never seen you around before. And folks usually let me know when we get new medical staff." "Maybe they didn't think it was important," she said quietly. Ray didn't like that tone. Calm, confident. The kind that doesn't flinch. "Just doing my job," he muttered, handing the ID back. "You can go. But you might want to check in with security before you start walking around. Wouldn't want any confusion." Ava nodded politely, tucking her badge close to her chest. "Of course, officer." She turned and walked on, her heart beating steady but heavy. Behind her, Ray watched, his jaw tight, like he'd just done something right, when in truth, he'd just planted a seed of shame in his own story. Inside the hospital, Ava met Dr. Miriam Jacobs, the head physician, a kind but overworked woman who welcomed her warmly. "You'll find we're a little slow-paced around here," she said. "But we've got good people, mostly." Ava smiled, grateful. "That's all I need." But as the hours turned into days, she noticed the glances, subtle, sharp, and filled with quiet judgment. Patients sometimes assumed she was an assistant. One nurse hesitated before handing her medications. Even the receptionist once whispered, "She's the new one, from the city." Ava never let it break her composure. She'd learned long ago that respect earned through dignity lasts longer than the noise of doubt. Still, every night as she drove home, she'd see that same patrol car somewhere on Main Street, headlights slicing through the dark, and she'd wonder if Ray Turner still thought she didn't belong. Ray, on the other hand, barely thought twice about the morning encounter, until the whispers began. He overheard his wife at dinner telling a friend, "That new nurse saved a boy's life last night. She's from Baltimore, I think." Ray said between bites, pretending disinterest. "She must be decent then." His wife smiled faintly. "I heard she handled the case like a pro. You should stop by the hospital sometime and say hello. People talk about how kind she is." Ray scoffed. "Kind's good. But I'll take familiar over kind any day. Folks from the city don't always understand small towns." His wife gave him that look, the kind that says you're missing something. But Ray was too proud to see it. Days passed. Then weeks. And slowly, the town began to change around Ava. Not in its words, but in its silences. An older woman at the grocery store started greeting her. A young boy waved as she walked to her car. Even a few of her coworkers began asking for her help, realizing her calm wasn't weakness, it was strength. And yet, prejudice never disappears all at once. It lingers, waiting for a moment to remind you it's still there. That moment came one Friday afternoon. Ava was walking out of the hospital after a long shift when she saw flashing blue lights up ahead, another routine stop by Officer Turner. A teenager was standing outside his car, hands trembling as Ray barked orders. "License and registration." I told you, sir, it's in the glove box," the boy stammered. Ava's heart clenched. The boy looked no older than 17. She could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear she'd felt that morning weeks ago. Without thinking, she stepped closer. "Officer Turner," she said softly, "is everything all right?" Ray turned, surprised to see her. His expression hardened. "Step back, ma'am. Police business." She stood still, her voice calm but firm. "He's shaking. Maybe lower your voice. He's just scared." Ray glared, but something in her tone, unafraid, compassionate, broke through his wall of pride. He exhaled sharply, then waved the boy off after verifying the papers. When the teen drove away, Ray muttered, "You shouldn't interfere." "I didn't," Ava said, walking past him. "I just reminded you he was human." She didn't wait for an answer. Ray watched her disappear into the hospital parking lot. That quiet strength, that grace that made him uneasy. Something inside him stirred, guilt, maybe. But pride buried it fast. That night, Ava sat by her window, looking out at the stars over Willow Creek. She thought about her late father, a paramedic who'd taught her to heal even those who hurt her. "Don't let the world change your kindness," he used to say. "Let your kindness change the world." And though she didn't know it yet, that lesson was about to be tested in the most unexpected way. Because within 48 hours, Officer Ray Turner's life, and his understanding of justice, would never be the same again. Prejudice doesn't always roar like thunder. Sometimes, it hides in the silence between two people, one trying to prove she belongs, and the other too proud to admit he was wrong. It was a quiet Saturday morning in Willow Creek. The kind of calm that made the world feel smaller, like nothing bad could ever happen here. But small towns have a strange way of turning stillness into storms. Ava Coleman woke early, brewing her usual cup of chamomile tea. She'd learned to love mornings here, the way the sun crept across her kitchen counter, the way her neighborhood hummed softly awake. It was peaceful, predictable, at least on the surface. She glanced at the clock. 7:45 a.m. Her shift at the hospital started at 8. She tied her hair into a bun, adjusted her scrubs, and slipped on her name badge, Ava Coleman, RN. She looked at her reflection, a woman both soft and strong, carrying the weight of patience. Down the road, another morning was beginning, a different kind of routine. Officer Ray Turner sat in his patrol car, sipping black coffee, the radio humming faint static. He was tired, not just from the long night shift, but from a feeling he couldn't quite name. Ever since that second encounter with Ava, the traffic stop with the trembling teenager, something inside him had changed. He replayed her words often. "I just reminded you he was human." It bothered him, not because she was wrong, but because she was right. He told himself he'd been fair, that he'd done his duty, but deep down he knew better. There was a line between caution and cruelty, and he'd crossed it too many times. He rubbed his temples and sighed. "Maybe I'm getting too old for this," he muttered. By mid-morning, the town had come alive. Kids on bicycles, church bells ringing from a distance, the bakery letting out the smell of cinnamon rolls. And then, everything changed. Dispatch to Unit 3, multiple vehicle collision near Route 9. Injuries reported. EMS en route. Ray's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Route 9. That was where his son, Ethan, drove every Saturday to meet friends. He flicked on the siren and sped down the road, heart pounding, praying it wasn't him. As the patrol car skidded to a stop near the crash site, his breath caught. There it was, his son's blue pickup truck, crushed against a tree, steam rising from the hood. "Ethan!" Ray shouted, running toward the wreckage. The boy inside, 17, barely conscious, groaned faintly, blood trickling down his forehead. "Hang on, son," Ray choked out, his voice trembling. "You're gonna be okay." He called in backup, then hovered helplessly as paramedics arrived. But in small towns, resources are thin, and the paramedic on duty wasn't enough. They needed hospital staff. At Willow Creek General, Nurse Ava Coleman was just finishing charting patient notes when the radio crackled. "Incoming trauma, male, 17, severe collision, head injury, internal bleeding suspected." "Got it," Ava said, rushing to prep the trauma bay. Minutes later, the ambulance screeched into the ER bay. The back doors flew open, and there he was. A young boy, pale, bleeding, barely conscious. And behind him, a familiar voice shouting, "That's my son. Please, help him." Ava froze for just half a second. The man running beside the gurney was Officer Ray Turner. Their eyes met, his full of panic, hers full of shock. But she didn't hesitate. "Get him to Trauma 1. Ava commanded, snapping into focus. "Vitals now. Let's get 4 access. Hang 2 units O negative." Her voice carried authority, calm under chaos. Ray stood there, frozen in disbelief. The same woman he doubted, questioned, humiliated, now leading the team trying to save his only child. He tried to speak, "Nurse, please," but words died on his tongue. She didn't look at him again. Every ounce of her focus went to Ethan. Pulse weak, pressure dropping. An EMT shouted, "Push fluids now. Get me suction." Ava ordered, leaning in. "Ethan, stay with me, okay? You're safe. We've got you." Her hands moved fast, steady, purposeful. Every motion came from years of experience, the kind that doesn't need validation, only trust. Within minutes, they stabilized his airway and stopped the internal bleeding long enough to prep for surgery. When the doctor arrived, Ava briefed him in precise detail, every medication, every reading, every step she'd taken. The doctor nodded. "Excellent work, Ava. Let's take him up." And just like that, she stepped back, her hands stained with blood, her heart still racing. For the first time in his career, Ray Turner had no words. He stood in the hallway as the elevator doors closed behind his son's gurney, and the last person he saw was the woman he once accused of not belonging. Hours passed. Ray sat alone in the hospital corridor, head in his hands. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed deafening. Footsteps approached. He looked up. It was Ava. Her scrubs were wrinkled, exhaustion etched across her face. "How is he?" he asked, voice trembling. She paused. "Stable. Surgery went well. He'll recover." Tears filled his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. She nodded once, professionally. "You're welcome, Officer Turner." Her tone wasn't cold, just distant, like a wall built not from anger, but from self-respect. Ray wanted to say more. To apologize. To tell her he was wrong. But shame locked his tongue. She turned to leave, and for the first time in years, Ray Turner felt small. Not because of authority lost, but because of humanity gained. In the days that followed, word spread quickly through Willow Creek. The story was everywhere, that new nurse saved Officer Turner's son. The same people who once whispered about Ava's background now praised her skill, her grace, her strength. At the diner, a waitress who used to ignore her smiled and said, "Heard you worked a miracle, Nurse Coleman." Ava only nodded. "Just doing my job." But privately she felt the shift. The town had seen her, truly seen her, for the first time. And yet, the man at the center of it all remained silent. Ray visited his son daily, always catching glimpses of Ava from afar, never knowing what to say. His pride and guilt waged war inside him. Until one evening, as he sat beside Ethan's hospital bed, his son spoke softly. "Nurse Ava's really nice." Ray looked at him. "Yeah, she is. She told me you were outside the room waiting." He nodded. "She said you cared." "But Dad," Ethan's voice wavered. "Why did you treat her bad before?" Ray's heart twisted. "What makes you think I did?" "Because she didn't have to say it. I could see it in her eyes. The way she looked at you, like she forgave you for something you didn't even ask for yet." Ray couldn't answer. His throat burned. Ethan's hand squeezed his. You should say sorry, Dad. People remember kindness more than they remember mistakes. Those words, from his own son, hit harder than any reprimand ever could. That night, Ray sat in his car outside the hospital, staring at the glowing sign, Willow Creek General. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. He saw his reflection in the glass, tired eyes, unshaven face, and something new, regret. He whispered to himself, "You were wrong, Ray. All this time, you thought you were protecting the town. Turns out, you were just protecting your pride." He knew what he had to do. He turned off the engine and stepped out, heading back inside to face the woman who'd shown him what real courage looked like. The rain outside Willow Creek General Hospital fell like a confession. Every drop a reminder that some storms don't destroy, they cleanse. Inside, the night shift hummed quietly. Hallway lights dimmed, monitors beeped in steady rhythm, and somewhere in the distance, the coffee machine hissed and gurgled. Officer Ray Turner stood in front of the nurse's station, hat in hand, heart pounding like a rookie on his first call. He hadn't felt this nervous in years. He spotted Ava Coleman finishing her charting at a desk, her posture straight but her eyes heavy with fatigue. For a long moment, he didn't move. He just watched her, the calm precision of her hands, the quiet command in the way she spoke to her colleagues. This was the woman he once doubted. The woman he mocked for being out of place. The same woman who had saved his son's life. Ray cleared his throat softly. "Nurse Coleman?" She turned, her expression unreadable. "Officer Turner. Do you have a minute?" Ava studied his face, the hesitation, the guilt, the sincerity breaking through his voice. She nodded slowly. "Sure." He followed her to the quiet corner of the waiting lounge. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and rain. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Ray took a deep breath. "I wanted to say thank you for what you did for Ethan. You saved his life. I'll never forget that." Ava looked down briefly, then met his eyes. "I was just doing my job." He shook his head. "No. You were doing more than that. You were saving the life of a kid whose father didn't deserve your help." Silence stretched between them. He swallowed hard. "I've been a cop for over 20 years. I've seen the worst in people, and somewhere along the line I stopped seeing the best. I thought authority made me right. But that day I pulled you over, that wasn't about duty. That was about pride. And ignorance." Ava's expression softened, but her voice stayed calm. "And what changed it?" Ray's eyes glistened. "Watching you save my son while I stood there useless. You didn't care who he was, or who I was. You just acted. And I realized something." He paused. "Prejudice doesn't just hurt the people we target. It blinds us to the people we should be learning from." The words hung in the air, heavy but true. Ava crossed her arms gently. "You think an apology fixes everything?" He shook his head. "No, it doesn't. But maybe it's a start." A long moment passed. The rain outside softened to a whisper. Then, Ava sighed quietly and sat down. "You know, I used to think respect was something you could earn with enough degrees, experience, or kindness. But in this town, I learned it's not always about what you do, it's about what you look like doing it." She paused, then added, "But I also learned that people can change, if they want to." Ray nodded slowly, emotion trembling in his voice. "I do." A faint smile touched her lips. "Then make it count. Change the way you lead. Change the way you see people." Ray exhaled deeply, relief and remorse mixing in his chest. "I will." The following week, something unexpected happened. Officer Turner stood in front of the Willow Creek Police Department briefing room, facing a dozen younger officers. The department's mood had shifted since the accident. Quiet, cautious, almost reflective. He began his address. "I used to think that respect came from wearing this uniform. But I was wrong. Respect comes from how you treat people when they have none to give you back. Last week, my son almost died. And the person who saved him was someone I once doubted, because of the color of her skin. That mistake will haunt me. But it also taught me that we don't just protect laws, we protect humanity. And if we forget that, then this badge is just metal." The room was silent. Some officers looked down, others stared, absorbing every word. We all make mistakes. But the difference between a mistake and a pattern, Ray continued, is whether you choose to learn from it. He nodded toward the back wall, where a photo of the community hospital hung beside the town seal. This town deserves better. Let's start by being better. For the first time in a long time, his words carried real weight, not from his rank, but from his humility. A few weeks later, spring arrived in Willow Creek. The town began to heal in quiet ways, one small act of kindness at a time. At the local community center, an event banner read, "Unity in Service, a celebration of our frontline heroes." The crowd gathered, townsfolk, police, nurses, teachers, all mingling, sharing laughter and stories. Ava stood near the refreshment table, chatting with a few hospital colleagues when a familiar voice called from behind. "Didn't expect to see you smiling, Nurse Coleman." She turned. It was Ray, dressed not in uniform this time, but in a simple gray shirt and jeans. He handed her a small envelope. She raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Something the department wanted to give you. It's not much." She opened it. Inside was a commendation letter, signed by the police chief, thanking her for exceptional service and heroism. She looked up, genuinely surprised. "I don't know what to say." Ray smiled faintly. "You already said it, Ava. You said it when you saved Ethan." They stood in silence for a moment. Two people from different worlds, now connected by something deeper than apology, understanding. In a small town like Willow Creek, stories travel fast, the good and the bad. But the real change doesn't happen in headlines or parades. It happens quietly, when someone chooses to see another person not as a stranger, but as a reflection. That night, as Ava walked home under the streetlights, she stopped near the same intersection where Ray had once pulled her over months ago. She looked at the traffic light, green this time, and smiled softly. "Full circle," she whispered. Somewhere across town, Ray sat beside his son at the dinner table, saying grace, not the practiced kind, but the honest kind. "Thank you for second chances. Sometimes the people we judge end up being the ones who save us. And sometimes, justice doesn't start in the courtroom, it starts in the heart. Prejudice blinds us, but humility opens the eyes. It takes strength to enforce the law, but even more to confront your own bias." Subscribe to Hidden Tale Stories for more stories that teaches and inspire the mind.